大家好，我是 IC，
我是 KT，
你现在收听的是 ICKT
矽谷为什么？
大家好，我是 IC， 欢迎收听矽谷为什么。那今天呢，我们很高兴的邀请到这个 Paul Chen 哈，那他是一位连续创业者，同时也是我们曾经访问过的这个 Botrista 啊Sean 的这个 co-founder。那他同时有一个很特别的身份啊，是陈武福啊，这个创业者的这个崇拜的一个在矽谷的前辈，那他的儿子。那 Paul 呢，他本身是一个连续创业者，也是 Botrista Technology 的 co-founder 之外呢，目前担任该公司的这个首席产品官Chief Product Officer， 他负责了产品战略、软体产品管理和饮料配方的开发。他在管理分散式的远端团队的经验定义这个开放式硬体系统的产品蓝图，以及战略伙伴共同开发的这些方面的经验，有非常多的实务经验跟合作关系。那在那之前呢 Paul 其实是全球第二大无人机系统制造商叫Yuneec 的全球软体总监，那负责推动无人机的技术的商业应用。他曾经拥有这个venture capital 跟这个 PE 相关的一些经验，那还有一些早期投资的公司的经验，以及嵌入式系统和芯片设计工程师的实务能力。Paul 他拥有 MIT Sloan 的 MBA 学位，以及哥伦比亚的电机工程硕士和布朗大学的资讯科学学士。他目前和他的妻子还有4个小孩，包括2个男孩跟一对双胞胎女孩居住在湾区。Hi Paul, let's welcome you.
Thank you.Yeah,
it's great to have you here. And 各位来宾，我们因为Paul 他其实虽然会讲中文，不过他比较习惯用英文回答问题。不过 Paul 你还是可以用国语跟大家打个招呼，好不好？
嗨，大家好，我是叫 Paul，我是在美国出生长大，但我明年1月会搬回台湾长期住。
OK， 所以其实练习中文对你可能也有一点必要。不过 anyway， 我想我们的听众其实也蛮习惯用英文来收听我们的节目哈。So I'm going to use English since now. And so Paul, I knew that you grew up in Boston and the Bay Area, and also studied and worked on both coasts of the US. What did you learn and observe from entrepreneurship or the environmental factors and the differences between Boston, New York, and the San Francisco Bay Area? Or maybe talk a little bit about your childhood.
Sure, yeah, great question. I was actually born in the Bay Area. Since I was the oldest of 5, my father at the time was studying at Berkeley. So
yeah, go Bears.
Yeah, and after his studies, we moved to the East Coast. He was working for a company called Wang Laboratories. I'm not sure if you guys.
Yeah, we learned that from the interview. Okay. So he told us about the PhD, and also he prepared for entrepreneurial life about many years, 10 years actually.
Yeah. Definitely.
So he spent like 10 years in Boston, and you were there, right?
Yeah, so I think when I was not even 2 years old, we moved to Boston, and that's where.
So you can say you're original from Liberia, but moved to Boston.
Yes, and so growing up in Boston, we lived in a suburb just north of Boston.
Yeah,
it's in a town called Andover. It's well known for its private school. A school called Phillips Academy. There's 2 campuses.
I can say Boston is all well known about the school system. There are so many good public and private schools there.
Yeah, exactly. So I actually studied at Phillips Academy for high school. It's a private boarding school. Since I lived in the town, I was a day student.
Okay, so you don't have to live doing.
Correct.
Or boarding.
So,
okay.
So I may not have gotten the full experience, but definitely in terms of the academic.
Yeah, it's quite different with the public. Yes.
Correct. Yeah. So it was a very challenging place, but I think about half of the students go to an Ivy League school.
Wow, so competitive.
Yeah, I think out of our class of 300, 10% went to Harvard.
Whoa. But yeah, you took your undergraduate degree in Brown, yeah, and then
I wanted to study computer science or at least engineering. So I got in the EE program, but decided to pursue computer science.
Yeah, that was like your late 90s, right? I think we are almost at the same age.
Yeah, it was 96. I graduated 2000 from undergrad.
Okay. Yeah, and you went to master directly or after some working experiences?
No, so 2000 was sort of the peak of the .com bubble.
Yeah.
I wanted to come out west. That's where my dad had started a bunch of companies in the Silicon Valley. So after graduation, I actually ended up working for one of his startups called Anda Networks, and 2 years into it, that was when the whole .com bubble burst. And, I figured I
so you can say you experienced the first time of the, the dramatic downturn of Silicon Valley, right?
Yeah, exactly. It was a very crazy time back then.
Yeah, and you're still quite young, just fresh graduate.
Yeah, and we filed to go public. We had champagne bottles ready for it.
Yeah.
We had to.
Wow, such a huge difference in the time you enter, but and 2 years later.
Yeah, so exactly 2 years after I decided, it was a good time to go back to school.
Yeah.
I've always had a lot of interest in hardware and understanding how computers work. So that was the time when I decided to get my master's in EE.
Cool. So it's been like 2 years in Columbia?
Yeah, about 1.5 years.
1.5 years. Okay, and you then you find a job back to Bay Area or staying in East Coast?
Yeah, I think because a lot of the tech jobs were back to
here.
Bay Area. So after graduation, I went back to Bay Area, and at the time,
2004, right? Okay.
Yeah. So at the time, I wasn't sure, kind of what industry I want to get into. I did have, a bunch of electrical engineering experience. So I ended up interning first at my father's venture capital called Acorn Campus.
Oh, yeah, this was the time. Yeah, he started. Yeah.
Yeah, and during that time, I had a chance to meet a lot of early startups and to, figure out kind of which industry I wanted to join.
So it's like, about 2004, so about 18 years ago. So what did you find? What did you find in the entrepreneurship and also some startups that your father and his partners invest or doing investigation before they invest? What's your finding?
Yeah,
and it's 2004, right? So that was the era, smartphone not coming yet, but we do have some idea of wireless network, or cloud computing.
Correct. Yeah. So I think they were very focused on deep tech, definitely more in telecom networking, also chips. I know, because of, my EE, I was very interested in chips and applying my skill set to do something more technical, and decided on IC design. So building ASICs.
So you're more like architecture wise or more design or fabrication, I think.
Design.
Which design? Okay.
Because I had a computer science background, so it lends itself to writing, Verilog or VHDL code.
Cool. So it's a little bit like full stack.
Correct. Yeah, and so I was very interested in this company called Fortinet at the time. We invested very early on. The two founders are brothers from Tsinghua, and they started another company that was acquired, very early on. So in the network security space, and one of their key differentiation was their ASIC that they built to help accelerate a lot of the virus detection and intrusion detection.
Okay.
I decided to join that team. It's a very small IC team they built. And that was in 2004, where they had just raised a very large round to go public. But
good
they
for
did
you.
end
But
up going public. So.
so it's more like you're how many years have been doing like for product development or engineer, and then when did you choose to pivot to get an MBA?
Yeah, so I spent about 3 years doing chip design. I think after kind of that experience, I learned I was a pretty decent engineer, but I wasn't the best engineer. And so,
Yeah.
I felt like my value was probably more in product and understanding what to build and what the market needed. So at the time, I applied to MBA programs. And fortunately, Fortinet, they let me spend a year kind of prepping for business school. So they gave me an opportunity to join the business development team. At the time, we were just starting to work with industry partners to create joint solutions with our hardware and other kind of software solutions. So we built up a global alliance program from scratch, in order to kind of build up the industry and get kind of create more full stack solutions.
So when did you go to Sloan, and what time did you graduate?
Yeah, I went in 2008.
What a time.
Yeah, so it was, I guess, good timing in the sense,
So it's been like 2 years. So you graduate 2010.
Yeah, I graduated 2010, and at the time, a lot of my classmates were getting jobs from big tech companies or consulting firms. So I felt like it's probably good to get some big company experience. So given I have technical knowledge in chips, I ended up joining a analog device company called Maxim Integrated.
Cool. Still back to the Bay Area, right?
Yeah, so back to the Bay Area. So the 2 years I was the business manager of the display system product line. We were mainly selling components to the LCD panel industry.
Wow.
There's only a handful of sort of these large factories in the world, all based in Asia. So I was spending almost half my time in Asia.
Cool. So you spent like now by far it's about like 10 years after you graduated from university. 2 years of master, 2 years of MBA. So you got like 6 additional working experiences. So what make you to move to the other roles, more like business wise, and or even like become an entrepreneur or venture building after like half of your 20 years experiences?
Yeah, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I think a lot of it was that influence from my father. But I always felt that I wasn't ready. And I think part of me is I'm very intellectually curious. So once I learn something, I sort of want to learn more. So the more I learn, the more I want to know. So that's why I've been in so many different tech industries. And I think, sort of getting my MBA, I felt like I was ready. I've built my network. I've had enough hands-on experience as an engineer that I, understand, technology good enough to kind of build build my own product.
Okay. So you left the integrated company and joined Yuneec, right? Do I pronounce it right?
No, actually, I left Maxim and decided to start my own company. So,
yes.
So for 4 years, I had 3 startups I was working on, sort of, quick succession. My kind of mantra then was to, fail quickly, right?
Yes.
And, a lot of time to launch quickly, to build proof of concepts and try to see if there's any product market fit. So, first company was sort of with some of my Sloan classmates. We built a video recommendation engine. I think today it's probably similar to TikTok in a way, except we would kind of collect all the videos from the internet and kind of show you the best ones. So we essentially built that from scratch. So I was responsible for all the front end development. And then, we didn't get too much traction. So I quickly pivoted to working on a ASIC for the Litecoin crypto industry. So at the time, crypto had exploded, right? I think at the time
it's
was
2012, right?
Yeah, they hit $1,000, and that's where I was very interested in this space, and trying to learn more about the technology, the blockchain, and how things work. So that's when I decided to try to jump into the whole mining trend, and that's where given I had some connections and experience with designing chips, we actually built a Litecoin ASIC.
But why did you didn't keep continuously work on the space and pivot to like more deep tech companies? I bet you must have much more feeling about the Web3 or crypto.
I think it's all about timing, right?
Yes.
When we first started, that was when a lot of companies were getting pre-orders for their mining equipment before they built anything, right? There were companies making tens of millions of dollars of pre-sales, and when we started, that window pretty much just closed. So we ended up getting very little pre-sales, and at the time, that was when Litecoin was sort of at its peak as well. So by the time we finished the chip, the price dropped from $15 to kind of $5, right? And we had to somehow fund the whole tape out process, which is fairly expensive, right? Even though we're using slightly older node technology, it would cost us at least $3 million to tape out at TSMC. But the good thing is that we did have a design that worked. We ran it on a FPGA, and we were actually mining Litecoin by testing it. So, but it's just a matter of timing. It was hard for us to raise money at a time where the price of the coin was low.
So back to the year you joined Yuneec. So you spent like about 10 more years about being engineers and being entrepreneur. So what makes you become more? I think it's very good. For accumulating experiences on startup from 0 to 1, everything from scratch. But so you join like a more bigger company and choose to run the global software directors. What's the difference between the big companies and the small startup?
So I spent 4 years essentially just working day and night trying to build product, and I was pretty burnt out, right? And I felt like I just kind of did some introspection. I felt like what I really enjoyed was working on hardware platforms, right? Not just pure software or just pure hardware, but and so I started to look into kind of different spaces, in IoT and consumer hardware, in self-driving cars, EVs. But I really enjoyed robotics, and so drones was sort of a type of robotics that was starting to, get a lot of traction. And I felt like that's sort of what I was most interested in. So, decided to join Yuneec, which at the time was the second largest manufacturer of drones after DJI, of course.
Yeah.
And, I think my real kind of value is more on the software side.
Yeah.
And so, I wanted to help them expand their business more in the commercial applications of drone technology. They had made a lot of consumer drones more for, photography and videography. But there are still a lot of use case that you can use with these drones that's not, for fun, essentially. So,
yeah, we'll talk about later about what's your point about the drone industry. But yeah, maybe you can learn more about. Yeah, let's do it. So, what kind of influence by your father, since you have such a well-known father, and even he once be called the god of entrepreneurship in Taiwanese society. So, would you like share about what's his role model influence or suggestions that gave you during your startup or even investment or being like a venture builders?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm very fortunate in that he's a great resource for me.
Yeah.
I think entrepreneurship is not easily taught. It's, you have to learn through doing, right?
Yes, totally agree. Yeah.
I was in MBA program for entrepreneurship. It's really hard to learn it, right? You just have to kind of find your own path. So, I mean, he's been fairly hands off in terms of, kind of, what industry or what passion drives me. I think it's really up to the person to find, what you're passionate about. But he's always been there to support me in terms of, connections, right? Whether, it's through fundraising or finding more customers, partners, or just people to give advice. I think also through a lot of his experiences, it's also been, good learning experience to hear sort of his path and, sort of how he built up sort of different competencies in order to, be successful.
Cool. Yeah. So through your observation, or maybe more like a very nearby position that you can learn. So I think he must have sort of and you do have like 4 other brothers. Yeah, and you took different kind of role. And by the way, what kind of you also told us about you coming back to Taiwan and spend some time with your brother and their ventures. So what the difference between Taiwan and the Bay Area through your experiences observation during the last 2 or 3 years?
Yeah, I think, Taiwan is a small, say, community and market.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
For entrepreneurs, if you want to think big and go global, you essentially have to, design for that on day one, right? So it's sort of like Israel, right? A lot of the startups there would, focus on the US market instead of the local market. So
Yeah.
I think a lot of it is just perspective. If if you're in a sort of microcosm, it's hard to, understand and see what it's like in a different market, in a bigger market. So I think that's where, I see a lot of the entrepreneurs, they are quite talented. There's a lot of good technical skills and IP in terms of sort of overall business product strategy, because they're sort of limited to Taiwan. It's hard to think bigger, right? some of the entrepreneurs I met, it's more because there's less venture capital early stage. They need to just sort of build based on sort of this incremental success, right? So, I think that's where it's harder for them. If you can't get capital to expand, then you have to use sort of your revenue to reinvest in the business. And a lot of the business are more sort of contract based, where it's more about labor and taking on a project in order to get revenue.
Yeah. So I knew some of your colleague or more like your friend try to invest in Taiwan. Or some of our guest speakers like Kai and Samantha are also very familiar with. So I think you are not being so-called a Taiwan mafia, but you are kind of maybe one of their communities. So what do you think that the difference between Taiwanese American investing in Taiwan or like more to helping the Taiwanese entrepreneur into the overseas market, is that's possible, or what is the best way you think to combine the different resources from the Taiwan and the Bay Area across the ocean?
Yeah, I think in terms of the global economy, you just really need to focus on what your competitive advantage is, right? And
yes,
I think for Taiwan, what I see is, definitely they've a long history of contract manufacturing and semiconductors, right? And they're very good at improving yields, right? And some of that has kind of spilled over to other industries like ag technology or energy, right? Where you're very good at kind of optimizing the yield of some process, right? I think Taiwan is also very good at small scale precision manufacturing.
Prototyping or the very fast.
I think that's where, right now robotics is a good industry because it's still very early. You don't see kind of large scale robotics quite yet, right? So, or even in medical devices, it requires very high quality precision manufacturing. So, or it needs to be audited or have some kind of standard, which I think it's much harder for China-based manufacturers to do, right? So I think Taiwan should really focus and try to leverage its strengths, right? And to work with other markets, larger markets, to bring some of their advantages to these markets. So sort of that kind of leads me to sort of how I got involved with Botrista was that, I felt that they had set up a R&D center in Taiwan to do the development and design of, these drink machines and really leverage kind of the low cost and high quality hardware design, and have sort of the business headquarters be based in the U.S.
Yeah, I think Botrista has quite a really good story that we can share it a little bit later. But yeah, let's talk about before you joined Botrista, I work as software director of the drone industry that you've been talk about. So what's the observation or deployment of drone industry and or artificial intelligence and the integration of software and hardware in the robotics field that will come to the, I think you are now still working more like automation and robotics, although it's more related to food tech. But yeah, what's your point of view that the machine world drone is more also like a machine, but comparing to traditional aerospace or flight. So, what's your your lesson learned or taking away from last job?
Yeah, I think drones initially was more of a hobbyist market with more of the RC kind of planes. Over
more
time,
like toy. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, but over time, it just became more sophisticated. A lot of the parts actually came from the smartphone, right? So as some of these bigger industries drive more innovation, some of these components can be used in other kind of robotics or other fields, right? And early on, drone was almost like a flying smartphone, right? It had all the components, very similar components as a phone. So and initially it was more just kind of user controlled, and now that there's more sensors, kind of with the EV industry and autonomous driving, there's more and more components now that can also be used for robotics. Things around computer vision and AI, right? I think when we were working on sort of different autonomy levels of autonomy, right? I think we had sensors to do collision avoidance, and some of it, a lot of the kind of smarts had to be kind of pre-programmed into the drone, right? You have to tell it which path to take versus it's autonomously flying and sort of doing the what's it called, SLAM. It's localized mapping, and some of that technology was starting to be adopted as well in the industry, where I think it's a much easier problem than self-driving cars, because when you're flying, there's much less obstacles that you can hit, right? If you're above a certain altitude. So,
by far.
Yeah. So,
yeah, we're not talking about flying car or flying or drones like can with humans on land.
Yeah, so a lot of it was integrating different types of sensors. So, with a RGB camera, or you can add a zoom camera or a thermal camera, then you can start to see, kind of make sense of kind of the different objects or things you want to observe. So, I think that the main issue with the drone industry is the regulation, right? Because it can be a big liability if you're flying over people or buildings. So a lot of I would say the killer apps for drones were like delivery, right? And
the last mile,
and
for fulfillment,
right, and that just it's a slow industry, just because you would need to kind of get through all that regulation in order to be able to really launch something commercially.
But still, I think the industry is going great, in a healthy way, right?
Yeah, so we were focused on some applications like construction, being able to do site surveys and do progress mapping of construction sites. Also in public safety, right, being able to do search and rescue or to monitor a crowd. So some of these sort of more dangerous things, or things that weren't possible before, we could use drones to be able to fill that solution.
Yeah, so I think you really had a great time there. And what's the reason that you found, or you met Sean, or anything that what makes you become a co-founder of Botrista and left last job to become an entrepreneur again and join the food tech companies to to do the things you are going to do right now?
Yeah, so I actually met Sean while I was at Yuneec. He had reached out to my father for investment early on. And because it was in sort of the robotic space, my dad sent me the deal to look at. Initially, they were working on a boba cooker.
Yes.
It's essentially, it automates the 1 hour process of cooking boba. And they were selling it to boba shops around the Bay Area. So at first, it to me wasn't very interesting because it was more of a one-time sale. And it's a fairly small market as well. But then Sean came back a year later, and after they had launched the product and got some initial traction. And they were also starting to look at drink automation as well, since they spent so much time in the boba shop. They knew how to make the drinks, where to buy the ingredients, and the whole process to make drinks. So they had built a prototype of a machine that could automate every single drink on Gongcha's menu. I think at the time was about 27 drinks. And so that was when I looked at their progress, and I was pretty impressed by how much progress they made with just very little resources. I think they had only raised $500K. And survived for a year and a half with a team.
The super lean.
Yeah, exactly. So at the time, a lot of Kickstarter projects were raised tens of millions and not be able to launch a product. So it was quite impressive.
So you after watching their progress, and you decide to what makes you make the decision?
Yeah, at the time I was debating, whether I wanted to start my own company again or potentially join an early startup. After working at Yuneec, I realized that hardware is very hard, especially if you're just building devices to make a one-time sale. I really started to look at sort of recurring revenue businesses with hardware. So at the time, it's hardware as a service was just starting to become a thing. With Peloton.
It's the right timing. Yes. That's why Botrista is so unique, because not only selling the hardware, but it's also provide a service or the materials that can become just like you say, recurrent revenue.
Correct. So that was one thing I was very enamored with. So trying to make a hardware business more like a SaaS business, right? And I saw a lot of potential in sort of what they're working on in terms of automating drinks, and at least in the food and beverage industry. And it would be much less kind of regulation or any other barriers to adoption. So I felt like it was ripe for sort of disruption. And having come from the semiconductor world, our kind of innovation was always about smaller, faster, cheaper, right? And so, having seen their prototype, I felt that we could capture a lot of the value of the automation by making it faster, smaller, cheaper, so that we can really scale in terms of deployment. And we didn't need to automate everything, right? Like for a drink making, if you don't add the ice, it's if you can automate 80% of the process, you still create more than 80% of the value of the product. So that's when we kind of took out a lot of sort of nice to have automation, try to make it as small, as compact as we could. And so after I joined, 3 months into it, we had a prototype that we launched at a early customer.
Cool. The process you described just make me think about the first principle that Elon Musk mentioned and what apply many aspects in like Tesla and SpaceX when which the company Sean works with. Yeah. So, do you think you are very first principle thinking in Botrista company?
Yeah, I think having
Yeah.
gone through 3 other startups, I think what I learned was we need to do rapid prototyping and test early at startups, right? I think it's less
Yeah.
about knowing how to build it, it's more about figuring out what to build, right? And that was always our focus was that we would launch very early and gather feedback and quickly iterate. And I think we've been from our first prototype, we've gone through 5 generations already in 3 years.
Yeah.
So so I think that's been one kind of way that we've been able to get to product market fit without spending too much time trying to build the best mousetrap.
Yeah. So currently you are also responsible for product strategy and beverage formulation development. So how do you see the business opportunities in this industry and what kind of customer feedback that has helped you determine your strategic direction in Botrista?
Yeah, I mean, the founders, me, Sean, and Peter, we're all quite technical. We all have tech backgrounds and yet we're trying to build a solution in the food and beverage industry, right? So I think initially we were very focused on the hardware, on the software. And, once we kind of launched at customers, we realized that they don't really care that much about the machine, right? They want a easy to use full solution. So they want to buy ingredients from us. They want us to provide the recipes, right? And all they want to do is sell the drinks and make more money, right? So I think that's when we started to realize that the drinks are what matters a lot. It's essentially that's what their consumers or their customers pay for, right? And so being able to really find product market fit was that to be able to offer drinks that their customers would purchase. So, we started to spend more time on the supply chain in order to have, good ingredients that can create good drinks, right? And now we've also hired an in-house mixologist who helps us with developing recipes to and just a whole line of drinks for different product categories that will sell at different cuisine types or different restaurant types that we're targeting.
Yeah, I can definitely tell the difference. I met Sean like many years ago, and I interviewed him like 2 years ago. That's still it just launched the generation 4 or 5 of the machine, and and also the beverage you made are much more way more better right now, and there's so many different kind of flavors and also mixtures right now. Yeah, so I think thanks for your time today. We've been talking about so many about your background story back to Boston, your childhood, and also the influence by your father as a son of Chen Wufu, and also what kind of things you've been doing in your entrepreneur and jobs during many different tech companies, and like drone industries and food and beverage right now. But I think I'm lucky to have you today to being listening to your story, but also about what your experience in the United States in Bay Area. But by the way, I learned that you are going back to Taiwan next year, right?
Yeah, so that's sort of my next journey or challenge is to help Botrista expand outside of the US, right?
Yeah. Learn a lot of that. Maybe not only Taiwan, but in Asia, right? Singapore, Dubai, or Japan. Wow, what a journey.
I think now that the product is a lot more mature,
Yeah.
there are a lot of opportunities outside of the US to,
Yes.
address different markets
Yeah.
and be able to expand our revenue. So I think initially what I did in the US market, I want to try to help.
Good luck, and I wish you a very successful journey. And it's good things to see you back to the Asia region and have your family there for a few years. And I definitely believe there will be a quite differences or living experiences. Just like me, I've been spending 3 years here, but I really appreciate that, and I think you will have the same thing in Taiwan and also in Singapore or elsewhere. Yeah, I believe that would be very good for you and also for Botrista.
Yeah, I've always been very curious about, living in Taiwan and
Yeah.
getting, closer to my roots and also just helping
Yes.
the Taiwan ecosystem. My father and brother are there already. They've spent,
Cool.
a lot of
So you
time
can
there.
spend more time with them. Yeah.
So I'm quite excited.
Good. Yeah. So I think that would be another chapter for your life and your family, or even for Botrista. So I'm so glad that we have you today to listen to your story and what's your the thing will happen in the near future. And I think we can have much more opportunity to interview you. But I'm so thank you for thanks for the interview today, and hope we can have the opportunity to interview you again next time.
Great. Yeah, really appreciate the opportunity and definitely look forward to maybe coming on again and sharing more about my experience in Asia.
Sure, and let us know if you need anything in Taiwan. We have so many Taiwanese audience in Taiwan, and there are so many are entrepreneur or investor. I believe you can meet them in Taiwan in person and have fun there.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to it.
Okay, so let's thank you for your time, Paul, and 让我们谢谢今天这个 Paul 给我们的很精彩的一个分享那包括他人生的成长经验、工作、创业，还有他父亲对他的影响，在 Botrista 他看到的这个创业历程啊、产品发展，还有最后怎么看待这个自动化和机器人譬如在无人机、在食品科学这个行业里面会有什么样的进展。那我们谢谢 Paul 今天的参与那我们就下次再见喽，谢谢 Paul， 拜拜。
好，谢谢大家。
感谢大家的收听，如果还有任何问题想要讨论，都欢迎到矽谷为什么的 Facebook 粉丝页还有社团留言哦，也请大家多多按赞，分享给身边的亲朋好友。
我们在 Apple Podcast、Spotify、Google Podcast 和 KKBOX 也都上线了，你也可以在这些平台找到矽谷为什么。再次感谢国发会 Startup Island Taiwan 和数位时代 Meet 创业小记的独家赞助，我们下次再见喽，拜拜，
拜拜。